Welcome to another week of Art Talk Tuesday. We're here today with the last piece in the live painting yoga series that I did in acrylic. And next week we will be moving on to the watercolor pieces I've done, which are a lot smaller in format, but I think that you will enjoy them. So this piece here is 36 inches wide by 24 inches high. It was begun as a live painting uh, with the Black Tea Yoga group, and then I ended up finishing it at home. It took me a couple of months to get this painting finished. For some reason, I just was having a lot of trouble with it, and it happens sometimes. It sat in my studio for I think about almost 3 months. And what I was doing, sometimes I just have it sitting there. It was sitting here on the easel, and I would just let it sit there. And sometimes I would just come in and spend 15, 20 minutes, sometimes just staring at it, just trying to figure out what I really needed to do, what I really wanted to do, what was I trying to convey with this image, and what was it saying to me. And I kept going back and forth, and I'm really kind of OCD about loose ends, so it definitely was going to have to get finished, but I usually never take that long, but things happen sometimes. So I got the piece done. This piece is called Garland Pose, also in the Sanskrit Malasana, Malasana. So garland pose, not garden, garland, as in garland around the neck, at Malasana. This is a grounding pose. As you can see, the figure is low and deep to the earth, legs open and spread to get maximum, get the feet have their maximum penetration down into the earth. Also, you see that the root chakra is down close to the earth, so this is definitely a grounding pose. And because it is such a grounding pose, I wanted to make sure that I use the colors associated with the lower chakra. So that's where the palette comes from, because I wanted all the grounding and the other things are associated with the lower chakras, the early one, which we consider the first, second, third chakras, right? So that's red, orange, yellow. So here we have, that's the reason for the palette, to really associate this grounding with the lower chakra. So that's what we're doing. The gentleman who was the model for this, his name is Rondi. You can catch him at rondiyoga.com. Great brother, does a lot with working with black men, particularly opening them up and letting them explore the aspects of yoga and getting more in touch with their bodies through more psycho-spiritual body awareness, as opposed to just being in touch with your body through a particular sport or athletic type endeavor. And so he's really good at that. It works with a lot of black men yoga groups that he does, things that he puts on. So it's really great. And I really wanted to put that kind of peace and repose that he has. A very quiet spirit, but he's really knowledgeable about what he does, and he really is creative in his approach to teaching, which is really wonderful. And people say, well, yoga is this, he's got certain poses, blah, blah, how could you be creative? But really, you can be. And when you find someone as creative as he is and so disciplined, it's really a joy to work with him. It was good to be able to photograph him. He's definitely one of my favorite male teachers. And so just wanted to catch that with him. You can see this whole idea of the spiritual here, this grounding down into the earth. We see the whole idea of his hands here in the position for devotion, right? And then eyes closed, you can see that he's kind of going into that other place. He is taking his body and using it to help transport him into the other realm, to help him connect more deeply to his spirituality. And so that's what I wanted to really show here with this pose with him. So you can see figures deeply grounded, feet extended out and down into the earth, root chakra down close to the earth so that he can absorb and bring in that earth energy, which is a grounding energy. And then this pose, you'd be surprised. You think just squatting down would be a lot simpler, but you'd be surprised. This is a very hard pose, particularly if you're tight in the hips, because you're opening up. And so it can be rather difficult, especially to hold it for a long time. You'd be very surprised. Hard on your knees, if you're not used to doing it, if you don't build up those muscles and build up the flexibility. And so he really just does it effortlessly. And you want to see that he's grounding down. And so getting down in that position, holding, and then just going within, taking this time, even in the midst of this, to go within. And what is obviously, we can say, a position of, it's not necessarily comfortable. It may be more so for him, but definitely for the most of us, it's not necessarily a comfortable position. But it's also very reminiscent of the position that a lot of people use in indigenous cultures. If you ever watch like National Geographic specials or some other things, documentaries, and they dealing with the indigenous cultures, a lot of times you will see them squatting down in a similar way. Not quite with the with the thighs open so much, but squatting down in that same way as a kind of a resting pose, a resting position, which is very interesting. Just that popped into my mind, so I thought I'd bring it up. But look at some of those, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And then just finding this place of rest, of peace. You can see he's dedicating himself to to spirit as he goes into the position for devotion, hand mudra for devotion, and then closing the eyes and going with it. It looks contemplative. It looks, and I wanted to give it that kind of sense of contemplative air, but at the same time, the color palette gives you the dynamism because all the colors are so bright, and these are bright and active colors. So we have this sense of repose here, counterbalanced with the brightness of the colors that want to imply action or movement or quickening. And that's exactly the dichotomy that I wanted to get there. And when I was online, a lot of times they tell us relax but don't be lax. And so this whole idea of doing that, relaxing but not being lax, because he's actively into the pose, holding it, staying grounded, finding his center within, and yet at the same time, he has to relax inside to be able to maintain that and stay in that place of tension, to stay in that place of focus. And that's really what we want in our lives. When things are too easy, it doesn't work. And when things are too hard, they don't work. I really learned that in terms of my own just practice in life and in practicing. I ride a lot of motorcycles, and there's a practice zone that say you want to be about 70 to 80% in. You don't want to be 90 to 100, because if you're practicing that level, things usually go bad, they usually go wrong because you're too focused on the outcome. But if you can get a place where you're still pushing and yet you still have a certain margin of what we would say safety in that situation, you can really learn much quicker and practice much better because you're in that place of tension. It's not overwhelmed and it's not underwhelmed. And so you're just right there in that center spot and being able to maintain that. So that's what we got here. We look over here, this is another Unilome. I know I've talked about these in some of the other images, and as we go into the watercolor series, you're going to see these in every piece, but I'll talk about it again briefly. The Unilome is actually a Buddhist symbol of enlightenment, and the squiggly lines here, the squiggly lines all represent the path to enlightenment. We want to think it's a straight line, you do this as you take the steps and you go there. It doesn't work that way. Life doesn't work that way. Everything curves, revolves, back ends around itself. And so this whole idea of we are on the path towards enlightenment, and then when you get here to the center is actually the achievement of enlightenment. And this symbol here, just with the third eye being open, and wanted to use the same lower chakra colors, right? And just kind of being in there, just kind of reminiscent of the Egyptian open third eye, and just going here through this pose. And so this whole idea of mimicking this road to enlightenment, as we see here, being mimicked in the figure. So they kind of actually support each other. And then I wanted to make sure that he was grounded, as you can see. So I wanted to, even though this pose could be rather, I think, just depicting it, I was like, it could be rather boring. I had some other shots from different angles, and I was like, oh, this could be a little boring. We don't want it to get too boring. So I tilted the frame just to give it a little bit more dynamism. I think that between the active colors and the dynamism of the tilt in the frame, the tilt in the perspective, and it's still almost kind of like a worm's eye. And so that gives it a little bit more interest, creates a little bit more dynamism throughout the whole palette, as opposed to just what we've got going on in the figure. And so I wanted to make sure that it was very grounded. This is a grounding pose, so you can see here, I've done a lot to make sure it kind of looks like he's got his back partially up against a wall, and I wanted it to be that way. And I started to put another shadow back here, but I said, nah, I'm not gonna mess with it. So we've got this dark shadow down here helping to ground the figure and gives that sense of grounding. We've got the gradation of the tones here to give it another sense of grounding. So we're moving from that light to dark here to just kind of push it all back. The bright colors here pulling it out, going to the dark, pushing it back, so we get that sense of it really being grounded into the surface, into the floor, and then we just have this kind of backdrop here. And I still did a little bit with a shadow here as we move and transition the color out to the red. So this bright here, moving the eye here to this more subtle. Even though red is an active color, still this movement here that you get this gradation. It's not as active as the yellow. So everything pulling here. You see I've got the figure at an angle too. So everything kind of pulls just to give it a dynamism, and just doing some things, modeling in with the figure here, Really want to emphasize these hands, so they actually might be slightly a little bit larger than they actually would be with his frame. But I wanted to emphasize that whole idea of devotion here, because this is almost kind of like prostrating oneself or bowing down before the divine, in a sense, this pose. At least that's the way it feels to me. And then really just wanted to put the highlights in his hair here. We got some of the highlights, the yellows, the orange, the reds, from what's going on with the rest of the palette here in the hair and in the facial features, especially the orange. Really, I could have went with some yellow highlights to make it bright, but I really wanted to give this whole thing an overall feeling, an overall tone. So that's what we're doing this piece. It's valued at $2,800. It's available in print on my website. The prints, I think, start around 30 bucks. And then it's also available in the original. I have it available sitting on my wall in my living room, but I would love for you to come and take it off my hands. So thank you for tuning in this week. See you next time. Peace.